Welcome to the Situation Today podcast with Gulf Business. My name is Gareth Funsell, the Group Editor. In this episode, we speak with British record-breaking adventurer and leadership coach Adrian Hayes, fresh from his daring expedition to Kanchenjunga, the world's third highest mountain. Adrian made it to the summit, but descent turned harrowing. He ran out of oxygen, broke his hand, and suffered frostbite, facing some of the harshest conditions imaginable. We talk about that experience in detail, what drove him up the mountain, what nearly stopped him on the way down, and how moments like these shape his thinking on leadership, risk, and resilience. From the mountaintops to the C-suite, this is a conversation about pushing through adversity, making tough decisions, and leading with clarity under pressure. Adrian, I think just take us back to the beginning. What inspired you to take on Kanchanjunga, and am I saying it correctly there?
Kanchenjunga, yeah, pretty good try, yeah.
Okay, so I've got it on my first attempt, more or less, but it's the world's third highest mountain at over 8,500 meters. So why did you decide to tackle this particular peak, and what makes it such a formidable challenge, especially compared to like Everest and K2, for example?
The second question is easiest because it's nearly as steep as K2 and twice as long. It's the longest summit push from your top Camp 4 to the summit of any mountain on Earth. It is brutal, as I found out. But yes, so it's got a lot of challenges. You're not going to die from avalanches or rockfall, but exhaustion, exposure, that's the killer on this mountain. So where it all started was it's on the eastern Nepal border with Sikkim, India, right on the border, and a few 20 k's short of the tri-border with Tibet. It's in my old Gurkha recruitment ground from my old former Gurkha regiment, which I served about a decade with. So I know the area very, very well. I first saw it 30 odd years ago, and so I said, well, one day, when I get the motive, I might like to climb that. But that's how it all started. But I think I'm very honest about the why, because for me, this whole journey, I've been adventuring since I was 17 years of age, and I've really sort of tried to be authentic about it. For me, it's been the pursuit of adventure, of experiences, of enlightenment, even of growth, of excellence, personal goal, personal challenge, all this stuff. And that's what sort of really drove this thing. I mean, I had to give all the adventuring up when I had to bring my daughter up, which was more challenging than anything I've ever done. So I was out of it for seven years, but then came back, and 2 years ago, last year we tried Kanchenjunga, we didn't get up, and then again this year for the second attempt. It was a bit of an all or nothing, but why I say that is because the big mountains have now become, rather than the pursuit of excellence, it's become the pursuit of likes, followers, recognition, respect, and name and fame. It has changed hugely, and I think I'm still keeping this authentic. I use social media, but keeping this authentic internal reason why I want to do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you say that. I mean, has summiting these big mountains become an increasingly popular activity among a lot of people? Because it used to be quite a specialized thing, right? Or it always has been a specialized thing, but I think it seems like more people are doing it.
It has. Now you can ask why. I mean, now firstly, the Sherpas are now leading the operators. Almost all the companies doing it are Sherpa led. I think it's just a basic human society with social media, and it's a big topic I'm very passionate about speaking about. We are drawn to basically show that we are worthy, to show that we are significant, to show what we've done, to show we've traveled here, we've done this, and everything's just gone up. So it's not enough to do a marathon now. You've got to do an ultra marathon, an ultra. On mountain, it's not just the 7 summits, the highest peak in every continent. It's now become the 14 8,000 meter peaks. Everest is now, frankly, I think it's become a circus. There's so many people up there now trying it. Really, it's just, look, there are people still doing it for authentic reasons, but I think a lot is this consciously or subconsciously we're driven by social media to try and prove that, as I said, we've got something to show, and it's have this ongoing effect. And on the 8,000 meters particularly, a guy called Nirmal Persia sort of did it all in 7 months. It was actually 18 months. He didn't manage to get the top of Two of them, it made a Netflix documentary. And so suddenly this became the big thing to fly from helicopter to base camp to try and get this thing done in record times and all the rest of it. So it's now, everything up there has now become a sort of a race to become the first Samoan, the first Bulgarian, the first whatever, the quickest, the hardest, the youngest, this whole striving for records, which will get, Nims became very famous, Nims as he was known. I think for most people, you get your 15 seconds of fame and then you'll be forgotten. Nobody gets a name from doing adventures nowadays. It's all been done, sadly. And I think that's good, because I hope we get peak records gets out the way and we get back to doing these things for the real joy, which is getting away from the noise and really getting to nature, setting a goal, getting this whole energy, all these great things you get from being in any mountain. And I'm not just saying the Himalayas, you can get it up in the UAE. It's fantastic. The mountain ranges up there. I'm up there every weekend in the winter season.
Right. So tell us about, I mean, was it just you on your own summiting it? Was it a team around you? How does all of that work?
Yeah, so we had a team. Our team was eight of us, and we generally have a Sherpa each for the summit push, not for the rotations or the early stages. Basically, I was on my own or going with a teammate. And then there was one Danish woman decided to defer a week, sensible decision. Two didn't make it up on the summit push, so we had five of us, two from another team and one guy from another team. So eight in total, eight Sherpas pushing for the summit. We had a lot of problems. It was rushed. I left the top camp really thinking I didn't have enough water. There was all rush. We had to fix lines. Conditions weren't as good as the weather forecast was showing. Now we've been there already 5 weeks or so. So rotations up and down, we call you go up to take equipment and then acclimatize up there. But in the end, it took from the top camp, and we went from the lower top camp, if that makes sense. It took 20 hours to get from that camp to the summit. So we left at 6:30 p.m. on Saturday, the 10th of May, and we got up there 2:30 p.m. It was strewn out over a little way, about 2:30 in the afternoon. I ran out of oxygen on the way up. I actually ended up, I mean, the Sherpas who were leading didn't want to go up. They felt tired and everything. I ended up leading for about an hour or so just to push this thing, because I quite I struggle on early stages, but quite good when I get on oxygen. A few people took turns as well, but we got up there. But I ran out of oxygen because my Sherpa was behind, and and that was one fatal flaw in what has happened. I ran out of oxygen for a little while, which was a bit debilitating, but got it back and we got up the summit. So I actually summited pretty strong, 2:30, even though after I was desperate for water, but all was okay at that stage.
I mean, to run out of oxygen, that's quite a serious situation. How long can you realistically survive in a situation like that?
Good question. You're in the death zone, and the trouble that some people have summited, not many with this mountain without oxygen because it's so long. But other 8,000 meters people have oxygen, but people have done it without oxygen. But when you have oxygen and you run out suddenly, the plug of the electric car has been pulled out or something like this, so you got no charge and you ground to a halt. Now eventually he caught up and I got it, but it was he was not the most experienced Sherpa I had, and I don't want to be too critical, but he was quite junior and all the rest of it. So it was a bit severe, but we got it working. I thought we were okay, and so I summited in appalling weather. It's a shame because the summit is the most amazing view that you can possibly get, but appalling weather. I didn't stay up there too long. Quick video, quick picture. That was it. But I know you're going to ask what happened after that.
Yeah, what happened next? So you were then descending, and then you had a serious hand injury, which slowed down your descent, right?
Yeah, so it's very technical at the top. So it's a very technical mountain. So most people listening to this, watching this, abseiling down, you need two hands, feeding the rope and all this stuff. So coming down from the summit, a fellow climber tripped on a very precarious ledge, a traverse across, tripped, crashed into me, and I was forced over the edge of this ledge into the abyss. I mean, it wasn't hundreds of meters, but it was still 10 meters or something. With the fixed line, you got lines fixed wrapped around my finger and my hand, and all the weight on my hand took this fall, and everything, and I screamed in pain. It's snowing, it's awful weather. Managed to clamber up, but basically put the hand out of action. Now, with one hand out of action, it was throbbing. I thought I'd broken it at some stage, but it was just bruised. Obviously, with two hands, it took 10 times the time to get down. The Sherpa with me was putting my line in the figure eight, we clipping me and clipping out. So, but after about 3 hours, we'd gone 200 meters, and 3 out of 4 hours, everyone else, the other 8 team members or 7, had got down to Camp 4 roughly. I should say, by the way, sadly, one French woman died, didn't even reach the summit. She was suffering. It was her first 8,000er. Exhaustion. She was urged to get down, but she tried keeping up, and she died sometime on this way down. Anyway, so very sad indeed. So but basically going down the 3 hours, we ran out of oxygen. And then I've run out of oxygen before, but then something happened which I cannot fathom. I started to experience hypoxia and a condition called HACE, high altitude cerebral edema. I started acting aggressively, said to the Sherpa, just get down, leave me alone, I want to stay. And all this is normal symptoms of HACE. Fluid on the brain, you act completely irrationally. You can't judge. I was hallucinating. I was seeing teams come up, they weren't there. And I've never had this before. I think it's because I ran out of oxygen on the way up, and also because I was out of water, and because we hadn't slept for pretty much 2 nights. I mean, you're exhausted anyway. But what happened, I crashed out, and I just, 8,300 meters, just went to sleep, as you do. And the Sherpa went down. They had a conflict. I mean, when you get haste at that altitude, you normally die. And so basically, I was left to die. You can't form a rescue at that height. I can be charitable. You could argue why, because I woke up a few hours later thinking, what's happened here? Quite a little bit more alert. I've got no radio, no oxygen. There's an oxygen bottle, but I thought no Sherpa. So yeah, basically, I was left to die.
So okay, so the Sherpas, they're the locals, right? Who know and understand the mountains, and they sort of are experts at. I mean, they're almost from a physical point of view, they're better equipped to handle this. But so they left you.
Well, they only one. We had the 7 of us who climbed up, the 8. We had 1 each, but he left me. As I said, he wasn't the most experienced. You're right. Physiologically, they're far better than we will ever be. But he was left. I was left. As I said, a lot of people expressed shock at that. How could they leave you? I can be charitable, thinking if I'm suffering from haze at that height, absolutely erratic, that's what I said, before people die. But it's when I woke up, I had no radio. So, okay, leave me, go down. But what was the plan? I don't think there was a plan. There was no radio. The oxygen beside me, there was no. If it was a full oxygen bottle, it would have been on me. It was left there with a regulator and a mask. So I had no idea what was going on. But this is when, and I'll go talk about, this is when I sort of kicked in, right? My GPS had run out of battery, but I guessed I was 8,300 meters. Right. Suddenly you get into process, military training. I was 10 years in the Gurkhas, 2 years in a special forces regiment. You've got to get down the mountain. There is only one thing you've got to do: get down that mountain. I started flashing my head torch, down at the lower camp. I thought I saw lights coming, cavalry's coming to rescue. It wasn't. It was an illusion. I'd already seen teams coming up, which was an illusion. So this is where my brain was. But even so, got down, getting down the mountain, and I spent that night, all of the next day and into the next night, getting down from 8,300 meters to around 7,700 meters. I took a wrong route. I slid down 30 meters, taking a wrong route. I was seeing villages next to the top camp, which was still in the sights. I was seeing teammates with me. I was talking to people. They weren't there. I went to a guy having a sleep to see if he had some water. There was no one having a sleep. I was, just completely hallucinating. But there is just this inner voice, autopilot, get down, get down. Fear, worry went out the window. There was no thought of that. There was no thought of family. There was no nothing. But I was in a how I got down some of these steeper sections, and I went off the fixed lines. I don't know why, how, but I do remember taking a shortcut, what I thought was to the final camp. There seemed to be routes. I left the fixed line, and I ended up again just exhausted the second night by about 9 p.m. or no, actually about sort of I think 6 p.m. It was getting dark, and I ended up just crashing out again, just exhaustion. And that's when a few hours asleep there, then I heard a voice, a Sherpa had come up with oxygen. He shouted down at me, and he told me, and I actually spoke to him again yesterday. He said you were very cold, you were very weak, and all the rest of it. But he came down, put in the safety harness, went up to where the fixed lines were. I was 50 meters off fixed lines, got me oxygen down to Camp 4, and then the next day to Camp 2, and then helivac out over to Kathmandu. So I'm only here today for two reasons: because I managed to get down the mountain to a reasonable height, and the Sherpa came up. I'm very thankful to him.
And through all of this, you suffered from severe frostbite as well.
Yeah.
Saw
would
your
you like
fingers
me to show
that,
my fingers?
Yeah.
Would you? I mean, this is actually healing. This has now been 7 weeks now, but
Yeah.
this is frost. If you spend that time up that height, frostbite fingers, they're healing okay. One's a bit severe, and the right foot is still painful, but that's the penalty you pay. I mean, I woke up the second night out at 10 p.m., whatever it was. I looked at my hand. I thought, oh, it's frostbite. But yeah, so that that's my story. I mean, it's an epic story. I've been told that very few people, if any, have managed to survive in the death zone or get down in some of this in these conditions. There's been other rescues and things like this, but miraculous rescues. But it was getting down was the main thing.
And what was it that kept you going?
It's a really good question. There is what I said before, that the automatic pilot that just that tells you've got to get down. A lot of people get up, they crash out, they're exhausted, they don't have the fitness, and they wait to be rescued. You're not going to be rescued, and they die. So there was the knowing you got to get down. There's the physical. I was extremely fit, so I had the fitness to be able to get down. But there's a third one, which is also knowing that you could get down. I descended Everest I've climbed Everest. My oxygen failed on that. I got working before the summit, but I got down without oxygen from Everest in 2006. Last year on Kanchenjunga, I went down from the Camp 4 all the way down to base camp without oxygen, despite suffering. So there is that knowledge, knowing you can do it, and I think it's an important lesson. That's where I put it down to. I'm compartmentalizing, say shutting out anything else, as I said, and all these things. And by the way, just one of the lessons, a lot of people said to me, you're probably going to suffer PTSD, and trauma and things. Now, I have been reliving it since I got back, but there's not trauma. I'm the opposite. I'm actually saying, Alhamdulillah, I'm happy to be alive. Let's just celebrate being alive, because you can't look back, because the opposite is going into victim mode and woe is me and all the rest of it. So this is a small price to pay for it.
So I mean, as you've alluded to, it's not your first rodeo when it comes to climbing these summits, but I mean, you do this as part of your business as well, isn't it? I mean, it's part of your motivational speaking and your sort of team building and business leadership sort of areas that you look into.
Yeah, look, when I left, I got into the coaching world about 20 years ago, and the personal development world a good, another 25 years. Now, the first 10 years when I left Airbus in end of 2006, first 10 years I was semi-professional adventuring, and then a speaker and a business coach, because I got a big coaching world. I think now with now, what I speak about, and I don't call myself a motivational speaker. I speak on everything from change management to leadership to risk to values, to growth mindset, all this stuff, which is really part of my coaching world and the coaching consulting, things like that. All so the adventuring is just a more of a sideline now. But of course, one of the topics I've been asked to speak about much in the last few years is resilience, because rightly or wrongly, many C-level execs speak to me, CEOs say, look, we don't have the resilience we used to, particularly with a generational thing, and I do speak about this now. Yeah, I've just come back through most biggest possible example I can speak on resilience that you can possibly imagine. So you can, obviously I've got some credibility or real life stories to say. And one of the things I'll say, with this whole thing about resilience, look, it's bad things happen in life. Bad things happen on adventures, bad things happen in business, bad things happen in personal lives, all the rest of it. Expect them to happen. We've been growing up on this Instagram world of this false world that everything's going to be fantastic and you're going to be famous, you're going to be a model, you're beautiful, you're all this. It's not reality. Bad things happen. And and because they happen, you always got a plan B, a plan C, always got the backup plans. And the other thing, the three main lessons, the more you step out your comfort zone, experiencing them, better you're able to deal with life's problems in a positive rather than negative mindset. And this is all, I've been doing this stuff since I was 17. A crisis hit me, but panicking is no place to make rational, logical decisions. We just panic, and there's plenty of examples of leaders in the last few years of where we panicked. And I think this is where the whole thing about this growth mindset, just test yourself, fail, have failures and all the rest of it, but it makes you better equipped to deal with when things go wrong.
So why do you think that there is a lack of resilience? I think you've touched on it. I mean, some of the social media kind of aspects which seem to, glorify a lot of life and falsely glorify it, and other people always look like they're flying through life when they probably aren't. But I mean, is it a generational thing? Is it a cultural thing? What are your thoughts on that?
No, great question. Look, it's not worldwide. It's mostly the Western world, but we've been growing up the last few years, the last decade, 15 years, a risk-averse culture. I mean, that's one thing, risk-averse culture, safety first. Now, safety is of course excellence, particularly oil industry and things, but safety obsessed, risk averse, sanitized, wrapping people in cotton wool. We've got this offense culture that we've got students now. What we're being taught, what teaching people at school is just, not teaching people how to think, but what to think. And so when people hear things they don't like, there's this total meltdowns of things. You've got to expose yourselves to life's real experience, which is hearing harsh things, which is reading harsh things, which is harsh decisions, harsh living. Now, a lot of listeners of here who've grown up in Africa and the developing world, they have had harsh conditions, and they will know what it's like to be starving, to have petrol shortages, to have these things. We've gone so much the other way, and of course, we don't want children going down mines anymore, things like this. But we've gone too far, I believe, and this is where we're creating this generational thing, which we're not equipped to deal with things. And also another thing, senior executives tell me, and I'm going to say it's not everyone, but Gen Z and younger millennials can't solve problems. It's a very generalized thing, and some of your listeners or viewers may object. Well, of course, that's it, but it's a very generalized thing. But when you've grown up with smartphones, every problem you've got, you ask a smartphone to do it for you. And of course, with AI, everything's got a trade-off, everything's got implications. And I don't think when social media and AI is coming in, we've really thought fully about the trade-offs. Because, and I take the example of sat navs. Everyone drives with sat navs around. We fail to even do the basic thing of finding our way from A to B anymore. We can't do it. So there's so many reasons on it, but I think we're, and if life, my final point on it is, if life was a cushy comfort zone, comfortable, cotton wool wrapped life throughout your life, fine, but it's not. Welcome to the reality of life. Things go wrong, as I said. So the more you do it, it's just a testimony what I've experienced, in the last 2 months or last 6 weeks. It's just a testimony to this. Step out your comfort zone, experience problems and challenges. I've had enormous challenges, but you become better equipped.
And just as a final one, what advice would you give, any business leaders or anybody who's looking to climb the ladder in their career, especially when it comes to building that resilience? Because yeah, sure. I mean, it's, you go up these mountains, you've got experience in it. It's a pretty hardcore thing to do. But I think, taking those lessons to the business world, I mean, what is the kind of advice that you typically give people if they look to you for guidance on that?
Well, I say to business leaders, you've got to get your team together, however many it is, and explain how you like to work, how they want to work, and how the culture you're creating, and to build the resilience. For instance, okay, again, another thing I told that business leaders say to me, they can't tell people, they can't give people feedback because people get so hurt. Extol this thing. Feedback is the greatest lesson, the greatest gift we will ever get. Get that feedback culture in place so you can have the harsh decisions, you can have the harsh discussions, you can tell someone, not just your boss telling his employees, but you can have the harsh discussions with peers. Say, listen, I really want, but you get these sort of agreements in place. You encourage people to take risks. You have a mistake culture that is actually encouraged. You encourage people to take risks, to take challenges, critical thinking, think differently. And rather than all thinking the same, there's so many lessons I could give. I mean, I'm just rattling through in 1-2 minutes about some of the things you can get in place. But this is where we've got to encourage a culture where problem solving is taken on board, relished, critical thinking is encouraged, giving communication feedback is encouraged, and such like. So much more.
Okay, amazing. Thanks so much, Adrian. And yeah, just in terms of where people can find out more about you.
Yeah, adrianhayes.com is my website. I'm on the social media channels despite slamming it, but Adrian M. Hayes on Insta and I think LinkedIn, you'll find me on there. Can I ask a final question? Can I answer a final question? So people say, what's next? Is this the final mountain you're going to do? Well, it's not. It was always going to be the final 8,000 meter peak. I don't see the point of spending 2 months and a lot of money going back to do 4, 5, or 14. It's been done, but I will go back to 7,000 in Tibet, in Indian Himalayas, in Nepal. Not in the forthcoming future, but sometime at the end of next year or some of this, because I think getting away from the noise is one of the greatest joys of doing it. So I encourage everyone to do it, not just in big Himalayas, but get up to the mountains, in Hatta and Ras Al Khaimah and Oman. I mean, it's a fantastic country we've got over there in the UAE, and enjoy it for its fullest.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Adrian. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure. Thanks, Gareth.